Okay, so let's begin. So hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel and I am the marketing manager for Asia Pacific here at Acquia. So today's presentation is called CDP versus CRM. What's the difference? So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So if you have any questions for us, we are saving time at the end. So please be sure to use the Q&A or chat windows to submit your questions and we'll bring them up at the end. So this presentation is being recorded and we will share it with you at the end of the session. We have with us today Tony Peters, our pre-sales lead for Acquia Asia. Tony is a passionate technologist with experience in customer data platform, design, management, and deployment. As our pre-sales lead in Asia, Tony interacts with enterprise organizations and helps align IT strategies with direct business goals. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Tony. All right, Tony, take it away.
Hi, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, today we're going to talk about CDP versus CRM. What's the difference? And this is actually part of a CDP series that we're doing, the first part, in fact. A few areas that we're going to be looking at in this as part of this series is going to looking at different data sources. So as we move on talking about what's the difference after this one, we're going to talk about different data sources and systems, how they can come together and where the CDP is really going to shine in bringing that data together. We're going to talk about the execution of that data. So how does the CDP actually give the great boost in a unified way across these different execution platforms, such as marketing automation, personalization, digital advertising, even offline, etc. And then we're going to talk about things like great use cases for a CDP and how some of our customers are using CDP to great effect. So last thing I wanted to talk about on our series is that we actually recently did another series on digital maturity as well. And you're going to get a link to this as part of your follow-up emails and communications after this session. But I just wanted to highlight as part 4 of that digital maturity, we did actually talk about CDP and how it comes into that digital maturity story. So please have a look out for that follow-up communication we're going to provide and take a little bit of watching in there and see what we talked about in terms of CDP within that digital maturity. So let's get started. And I want to start off with saying, like, this is a common misconception that we see, is that people think that CDP, customer data platform, isn't it just a fancy database? So really, you have customers. So you know your customers, you've got that data coming from somewhere that gets stored by the filing system. It's a database and it's a platform. So customer data platform. So storing that customer database somewhere. But we're going to talk about how it's a little bit more than that. Well, quite a lot more than that, actually. And how it actually compares against and where some of those blurred lines are, but also how it differentiates itself from other platforms such as CRM, etc. But let's have a look at some of the definitions. And some of the definitions that you see going around across these platforms really don't help matters in terms of seeing what they can provide and what these differentiators are. So this is from David Rapp, founder of the CDP Institute, and he's saying himself, it's a marketer managed system that creates a persistent unified customer database that is accessible to other systems. So, okay, he's saying himself, it's a database. It's like, it's got stuff coming in, it's putting data together. But let's have a look at the definition of a CRM. And this is from Salesforce, arguably the largest CRM platform around. And they say it's a technology for managing all of your company's relationships and interacting with customers and potential customers. Now, when you see marketing information or people talk to you about a CDP, you could actually even think, actually, this is what a CDP does. It brings across that like data together and it looks at how that customer experience happens and it looks at potential customers, segments, etc. So why can't I do CDP stuff with a CRM or even vice versa? And it leads to quite a bit of confusion. But there's one thing that I did want to say, and that is just because something uses a database doesn't mean that it is a database. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean, lots of things use databases. Lots of apps on our phones, they're using databases internally to store some data, store your profile, your settings, etc. A CRM is going to store lots of information, known information about your customers. Now, whether they're potential customers or existing customers, it's going to store lots of information, maybe what sales stage they're in, etc. Your marketing automation database is going to have a huge database of contacts. It's going to have name, email address, probably things like loyalty points that you're bringing in from another system. It's going to have lots of information. It's got a database inside it. But it doesn't mean that just because something uses a database that it's a catch-all and it can be used as a data storage and usable for other purposes. So moving back to that CRM side of things, what actually is that CRM? What's it do and why was it built? And we can see here, we've got Salesforce. Many companies use Salesforce. So obviously got a very cute bear as a mascot. But have a look at this screen. It's very indicative of how many people and most people use CRM platform. It talks about quarterly reports, etc. It talks about segments of the things, so sales stages. It talks about sales evolution. How much is closing this month? What's the forecast, etc. It's very much designed and tailored for being able to configure for individual businesses and how their sales functions work. But the CRM has also evolved a bit as well, which has confused a lot of people as to actually where those boundaries lie. Now, CRM tended to take that mantle of B2B. So B2B and CRM are very strongly two areas that were very connected for a long time. But CRM is actually evolving a lot. And CRM tend to be used a lot more for B2B. And if you were B2C, you needed to bring some other platforms into play. But we're seeing that evolution, really, of that CRM evolving more into that B2C space by bringing in things like service clouds and service-orientated technologies and bringing them closely, tying them in with more traditional CRM, such as Salesforce Service Cloud, Oracle, Dynamics, really pushing on great stuff there. And that evolution has really sort of brought that sales process, etc., and leading that into the after sales process. And it's that one-to-one support area. But how is that a little bit different from things like the CDP? Well, with the CRMs, you're tending to rely lots on or fairly heavily on manually inputted data for one thing or another. So things like the updating of forecasts, sales stages, customer needs and requirements are fluid. If someone phones up customer support, then quite often you've got the customer service person is updating. Quite often they're using keyboards nowadays. In the future, that'll probably be voice recognition that will update that automatically. But there's still lots of input within there. If someone makes a sales call, a salesperson goes to a distributor, for instance, in a B2B scenario, they will update and say, yeah, that went well. I've updated this order. It goes in. The order goes and gets updated. There's lots of inputs, but it's really about those sales stages. It's talking about the sales, how that then progresses into those one-to-one communications. But a CRM is obviously not just a database. If it was, then people would be using things like maybe an old Access database, MySQL, Oracle database or something for their CRM purposes. Now, I know there's probably some people, hopefully none of you on this call, but using things like Excel as a CRM. We've got all our customer data in Excel and we do something in there, we pull some reports out, etc. Hopefully none of you are doing that. But at the end of the day, Excel also has a kind of database behind it as well. It stores all of that data within the rows and columns, and you open up a file and it brings up that data. It's a kind of a little bit of a database intern there as well. But really, is Excel a good CRM? Absolutely not, absolutely not. But the CRM platforms such as Salesforce, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, etc., it's that database inside, but it's got huge amounts of features and functions around it to be able to do the job it was designed for. So configuration to suit that company's sales needs, leading on to supporting the service org for those one-to-one services, and they're all configured to the individual businesses. And that's what they are designed for. So yes, you can store huge amounts of data, individual data, lots of PII, customer data, etc., but they're designed around that sales process, etc. Talks about communications with the salespeople, communications with the support teams, etc. Can you do it with just a database? Probably, but a lot of customization and work is out there. And that's why these platforms exist, because they're designed moving forward for that. Let's have a look at who owns these platforms traditionally as well. So who owns the CRM? Typically, it's the sales org that owns that platform. And the service org, if you're looking at extending that into one-to-one servicing capabilities. But it's the sales org that looks at those requirements, looks at the requirements and brings them together and looks at the configuration of the platform such as Salesforce. They go together, they look at, okay, what am I needed to help drive those sales? What's needed to help drive those, the particular way that we look at sales within the org, and they go and configure within that. Whereas the CDP, on the other hand, is actually typically owned and driven by marketing. Now, these two different parts of the organization are very different in terms of their needs, what they bring to the business in terms of value, and actually how they work. So trying to, and you can see where we're going here, trying to actually get marketing functionalities and all of the marketing, what they need into a CRM is not really applicable, is it? And it's the same as if you wanted to have a full end-to-end marketing type capabilities, the types of things that they want to do for their everyday needs, CRM is probably not going to be applicable for doing that either. Now, we see many companies actually, and many marketing teams, of course, they use CRM because marketing needs to tie into sales, because they're bringing in MQLs, etc. So of course they tie in and they use CRM to help drive those sales, but their functionality as marketing teams, not really suited for the CRM capabilities. They've got different functions and different supports and different KPIs. They need to do different things. So what does a CDP need to do? We looked at a CRM, we looked at the type of things and how they support business, but a CDP, what does it need to do? It needs to be able to identify the same customer everywhere that the person engages. Now, with a CRM, how the person engages, we typically look at things like, okay, the marketing team are going to feed him a bit with that. This is a qualified lead. We know this person, give them the thumbs up that they're interested in buying, so as not to waste the salesperson's time. The types of other inputs are people like results of a phone call, results of customer service, and things like that. But a CDP needs to look at much more in terms of engagements. Now, this could be anonymous as well. It could be as simple as someone clicking on a website, browsing to a particular page, someone clicking on a particular advert, whether it's paid, whether it's an organic search, whether it's engaging with Facebook or something like that. But it also needs to look at the offline as well. If someone has walked into a store, can we identify them in some way, even if we don't know their name, so that we can recognize them as someone and segment them on there? Secondly, it needs to be able to answer the questions that marketers need to ask. And that means having the data, having the presentation, and having the ability for the marketers to be able to query this data that actually gives results for their KPIs and their usage. Now, a CRM is very much designed or typically set up in a way that answers the questions for the sales org or the service org. Now, the marketers have very different questions and want very different results because they have different KPIs and values. So the CDP is designed and set up typically to give the answers for the marketing person. Now, if you wanted to do that in a CRM, you probably could, because they're actually quite flexible platforms like Salesforce, but the sheer amount of investment that's involved is going to be overwhelming. And actually, you're trying to repurpose, again, something that it's not designed for. Can you do it? Probably yes. Can you, it's like saying, can you make a, I don't know, make a spaceship out of all of like 1,000 different cars? Yes, you probably could, but why would you do that? It's quite a lot of work, as you can imagine. Then the third point here is being able to connect to and serve data to customer-facing engagement systems. Now, what do I mean with that? Is that, okay, we've got this data within here. We're bringing that data. We're looking at identifying those customers. We're answering those questions. We've got a great data set that's designed for those marketing abilities. But we need to be able to connect to and serve data and let these execution channels, these customer-facing engagement systems, use that data in a consistent way. So these engagement systems are things like personalization, website personalization, digital advertising, marketing automation. It could be actually firing off a list to a direct mail publisher. So you have a list, you send it off, and then your mailouts get done. So let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail, or a little bit more of an graphical overview, should I say. So the first one I said was identifying that same customer everywhere that a person engages. We look on the left-hand side, we've got lots of different engagement touch points. And these are just some examples like point of sale and e-commerce, if that's applicable. It could be email. So someone either sends in an email off their own bat, or they're clicking and engaging with emails that you've used. It could be call center. So it could be offline. It could be a ticket booth. It could be a salesperson within a store. It could be after sales support, but it's a customer touch point. It's website as well. So website is great for learning that information because they don't have to be known, but with the great analytics capabilities that are around now, you can actually look at behavioral intent of people. So people clicking around, and you can actually say, okay, we think they are they're doing this type of thing. So this is another great touch point. You've got third-party data as well. So third-party data could be companies like IOTA, Axiom, people like that, or it could be actually data that you're sharing with other businesses, segmentation data. So if you're in the travel and tourism industry, for instance, you could be sharing data with different partners. So you're saying, okay, you've got F&B businesses that work in different resorts and things like that. You could be sharing data between, saying, okay, these type of people are coming to this particular type of restaurant. We've got these type of people who are staying within the resort. This is a good marriage, and it makes it more attractive. So bringing in that third-party data is helping give that better picture. And you see at the bottom of the list, I've got CRM as well. So this goes to show we're not looking at replacing CRM. They are different systems. In fact, the CRM should be feeding data into the customer data platform because it is a great source of truth for a lot of customer interactions. It's just not all of the customer interactions. And likewise, we can also push data back into these platforms as well, such as the CRM. We can influence the website through personalization. So as we look on the right-hand side here, we look at execution channels for the marketing teams. And when we talked about being able to use that data, it's great. We can use that data to say, okay, because we've got a great, that sort of single customer view or great view of that person now across all these different touch points, we should be able to use that data, the machine learning and that kind of brain inside the customer data platform that is designed for the marketing teams to go and drive that website personalization. Give a nice unified messaging, and if we've done an upsell or something like that on the website personalization, why shouldn't that same upsell be able to be identified and pushed through on the call center if someone phones up because it's applicable to them? The same with outbound marketing, be able to personalize and send that outbound marketing to a list that's determined by a great data set that's not just in silo for what the marketing automation platform has, gives it a huge boost. We've got digital advertising as well. Digital advertising is great because you can identify really easily that return on investment. Why do you want to be able to send out and display adverts that you're paying to deliver and show if they're not relevant? So having all of these data touch points is great because you can actually bring that data together, identify, segment those audiences, and then push and execute on them. But in the middle as well, we also have that view that marketing teams can use as well. So CRM has got great views and dashboards, etc., that are primarily set up for the sales org and that hierarchy and structure from top to bottom. But they also do some dashboards and stuff that help out the marketing teams as well. I'm not going to deny that. But they're still very much data derived from that sales org and the setup. So really, it's going to be looking at how those MQLs are performing, what's working and not in terms of those MQLs and what they've done, and it helps define some of that strategy. Whereas the dashboards that we're looking at within the CDP for the marketing person are so much more advanced because they're designed for those marketing teams. All of that data that is coming in is not just from things like just the call center or just those sales calls that have happened. We're looking at so much more within there. And then you can also then use these tools to then go in and the interface to go and then define those audiences and segments. So unlike a CRM, the CDP is very much designed around the marketing teams and what they need to do rather than the sales org. I also wanted to highlight the type of data we're going to be storing within these platforms as well. Now, a CRM is very much about the known person. Okay, so when I say known person, it's like you know who they are. there is an identifiable touch point. Now you probably know their name, their contact details, phone number or email address, something like that. It's a unique identifier there, but you know who they are. Now a CDP is actually going to be a mixture of known and anonymous people or unknown people. So, and that goes for online and offline. So look at if someone walks into a store, for instance, we talk about anonymous, or someone clicks on a website. Now, if someone has come from Google, they typed in your business or something they want to do, they see your site listed, they click on it, you don't know who they are. You don't know who they are, I mean, from a identifiable point of view. You don't know their email address, their name, their age, or things like that about them. But you're starting to build a little bit of a picture up. You might have known the type of browser they're on, you might have known where they've come from, whether it was an advert click or something like that, and you maybe start to build up a behavioral pattern, but you still don't know who they are until they explicitly tell you. This is a huge difference between CRM and CDP. CRM is all about the known person. It's all about driving them down that sales funnel, whereas CDP actually is much more broader because the marketing teams need to be able to talk to the unknown people as well and drive them to be known, because then they can do the one-to-one communications through things like marketing automation, social pushes, and things like that. But they still need to understand the unknown, because they want to drive them into the known and push them down that sales funnel, which is when the CRM really starts to come into play. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding of where we see those differences between the CDP and CRM. But we've also got other examples of, it's not just CRM that has blurred lines and can come into this space. What about a DMP? So we've seen many businesses over the past few sort of 5 to 10 years looking at DMPs. And DMP is great at looking at this aggregated data, so bringing in some first party, second party, third party data, bringing that together in an aggregated view, and then saying, okay, these are the type of segments that I can use to go and push out and for digital advertising or things like personalization. Now they're mainly used for advertising, but they work on aggregated data. So they'll look at that data input, they'll look at you based on, and typically is cookies, because DMP is actually pretty much online only. It will look at those cookies and it will say, okay, we think you are this type of person, you sit in this type of bucket, and then we will communicate to you in this way via an advert or some personalization. Now, that's very much anonymous, isn't it? They don't really store PII. Now, you shouldn't be storing PII data in there. You're basically a number in a big system, and it looks at it, says, okay, we think you're this type of person, this is the context you're in, and we'll talk to you. They do a great job for things like digital advertising, but they're still very purposed on a particular realm within there. Now, when I say to bring DMPs into the picture, a CDP is not going to replace a DMP. What a CDP is going to do, and I'm actually going to move back a couple of slides here, and we can actually see on the right-hand side here, we've got digital advertising. Put a DMP in that box there, and what a CDP is going to do is going to really enhance that data set that's going into the DMP to allow it to do its job, which is really advising and talking about and advising the digital advertising side of things. Now, if you didn't have a DMP, then the customer data platform can start to fill in and do that, because it does work with aggregated data as well. But if you've already got a DMP and it's working really well from you, what the CDP can do is really boost that as just one of the channels that you're working with. The other example that we see people saying that we've already got something like a CDP, we don't need one, is marketing automation. And again, it's because people have that concept of customer database. Now, marketing automation tends to have generally a very rich set of data. It tends to have great communication data in terms of you've got email address, phone number, names, even segmentation data that you're pulling in from other systems, because nowadays more and more people are personalizing those emails that are going out. But the personalization and the segmentation tends to be within the silo of the marketing automation. But marketing automation is still fairly wide. It can do things like SMS and the one-to-one communications. But great, but its primary use is typically for outbound communications. It's really an execution platform, isn't it? It sits on the right-hand side of that CDP diagram I just showed, and it's for known people only. Marketing automation generally doesn't do a great job if you're unknown. Yes, you can probably feed in someone into some marketing automation plan, but it's not really designed around that. And if you're starting to work with unknown people within the marketing automation, you start to then hit some brick walls with there. So if we see, go back to that as a summary, and you can see on the right-hand side of those execution channels, such as the marketing automation. Marketing automation will get a real shot in the arm, so to speak, from a CDP platform. But it's not the only channel that's going to benefit. The DMP is going to benefit, or digital advertising is going to benefit. Your call center is going to benefit. Your website personalization is going to benefit. Some of your offline channels and your CRM is going to benefit from this. So think of that CDP as being much more than a database, much more than a single customer view, much more than a data lake or something like that. If you have a data lake or data warehouse, is the CDP going to necessarily replace it? Not necessarily, because your data warehouse could actually be doing lots of bespoke functionality that you've already set up. But we could look at that data lake as being one of the great data inputs coming into the CDP, because the CDP is going to give those great dashboards and marketing channels for the marketing person to be able to use. Whereas the data lake or data warehouse is probably very much set up for reporting and bringing that data together. So having that data warehouse or data lake that you've probably invested a lot of money in on that left-hand side and bring it into the data platform is great. We're not talking about the CDP replacing these technologies that are quite often being used as alternative for CDPs. We're looking at bringing the CDP in to boost and augment those other platforms. So at the end of the day, we're talking about making sure that you're using the right tools for the job. And you don't want to be, for want of a better word, putting that square peg into the round hole, because we've all done that with systems. We've all tried to use platforms and think, okay, I've got this, can I repurpose it? It nearly always ends in failure. It nearly always ends with reaching a brick wall quite quickly and saying, okay, we can't scale on this. And at the end of the day, it's all about scalability. And the great thing about CDP platforms is that they are SaaS offerings now. They are scalable. They deal with huge amounts of data. They deal with lots of different types of inputs and very scalable on the bespoke type of outputs and execution platforms you want to work with. So don't try and repurpose something it's not designed for. A CRM is a great tool and it's great for its purpose, but is it going to be great as a CDP? No, the same as marketing automation. Now, as I can say it in reverse, is the CDP going to be a great CRM platform? Absolutely not. It could probably give you some dashboards, etc., that's going to give you some great output that's going to help the sales team, but it's not going to be configurable to all the different sales funnel, sales org functions that they need. And I've actually got a case I'm going to finish up on that came out this week. I am British, and there's probably a reason why I live in Singapore and I don't live in the UK anymore. But this week, I don't know if you saw the news, but the wonderful government and their processes actually came up with a wonderful error in their systems with the corona cases. Nearly 16,000 cases were lost. Positive cases that they couldn't trace because they just went out of the system. And it turned out it's because they were using Excel and taking a CSV file, putting it into Excel, and then using that for the tracing system. Now, unfortunately, Excel could only handle a certain amount of data, and nearly 16,000 got dropped off the list, nowhere to be seen, but they didn't realize at the beginning. So this is a classic case of the wrong tools for the wrong job. Excel shouldn't be used for something like this, but because it was convenient for them, because it looked like it could store that data, and everyone is used to Excel, so why not? It wasn't the right tool for the job, and it's caused a massive effect happen. So this is a great example. I wouldn't say great is probably the wrong word, but it's an example of how you shouldn't really be using the wrong tools for the job, because really bad things can happen. And there's a very good chance you're going to reach a brick wall sooner or later. And in this case, that brick wall was actually, it reached that number of limits. They didn't even realize, and it didn't scale, and very bad things happened from it. So hopefully if you make mistakes, they're not as bad as this, but trying to repurpose a tool just because you have it isn't always the best option, and you end up investing a lot more money than you would have done if you hadn't if you'd used the right tool in the first place. Okay, so we're going to fire a link into the Q&A channel. Hopefully my, let's see, we have sorry, not the Q&A, the chat. So if you click on the chat button within Zoom, you should have a link to a survey. So we would appreciate it if you have a look at the survey, give some feedback on this, because I'm finishing up now. Please be frank. If you think I was absolutely terrible, don't bother opening the survey, just ignore it. But if you think I was great, please open up the survey. No, I'm joking. Good and bad feedback is always good. So please click into the chat and click on that link and fill out the survey. And just to remind you that this is the first of a 4-part series. Today, hopefully I gave you some insights around the differences between the CDP and CRM, and why you shouldn't try and repurpose some of these what look like great. We can store data, but doesn't mean it's fit for purpose of what we need to do. The next one we're going to be doing is going to be looking at, okay, you've got CDP, so what? And it's going to talk about the execution, why it's powerful and what you can actually gain as a business from this. Then we're going to talk about data sources. So the inputs, the outputs, what to choose, and the road mapping. And then finally, the what's next. I'm going to talk about some specific use cases and case studies, and really how our customers and different businesses have really benefited, different verticals have benefited from Acquia's CDP side of things. And I just want to finish up with why are we doing this series? It's because we're talking about customer end-to-end journeys now. They're getting much more complicated, more difficult with all the channels and data everywhere. And the great thing is the CDP is a really integral part of that jigsaw that often gets listed out. Now, we do see lots of companies that have data sources, lots of companies that have great execution channels. They're using marketing automation, hopefully a bit of personalization, websites and things like that. The CDP sits in the middle and really boosts both sides of things. So hope you can fill that survey out. I hope you can join us for the rest of the sessions. And Rachel's going to follow up and send you the follow-up communications. Over to you, Rachel. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's right. Thank you so much, Tony, for your time. So if anyone has any questions, please submit them in the Q&A tab or the chat window that's available. All right. Otherwise, thank you all for attending, and the slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted on our website and sent to you via an email. So be sure to look out for that. Any questions that we can take for now? Otherwise, okay, we are gonna sign off in a bit. Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending as well, Matthew. Okay then, see you guys. Bye.
Bye.